Hi everyone, thanks for watching. I'm Lauren, and in this video I'm going to share with you my hints and tips and advice for choosing a size to make when you're using a sewing pattern to make your own clothes at home. And this first step in the process, where you have to choose a size, can feel quite daunting. It might be that you've got your fabric and you've got your sewing pattern and you're ready to get started, but just that first hurdle of looking at the size chart and thinking, what if I pick the wrong size, or what if it doesn't fit, or you're just not really sure what's going on at all. It can just feel like, yeah, that big hurdle to get over. Well, you're not alone. A lot of people feel like this, especially in the early days of their sewing journey, and maybe when you're trying a new pattern company for the first time and their sizing's maybe slightly different. It can sort of knock your confidence a little bit. But if you break it down and just know what information is going to be relevant for you, then it's, you can get through that and end up with a lovely garment at the end. I do want to sort of add a caveat that this video is going to be what I plan to be the first in like a series of videos that are going to help you in choosing a size and getting sewing patterns to fit, and ultimately getting your clothes, getting a really good fit on the clothes that you make. And it can, it can be quite a journey, and depending on how many adaptations you have to make, it can be more or less work, and it's impossible to cover everything in one video. So sort of see this video as like the first stepping stone, or the foundations of being able to interpret the information that is in the size charts that come with the sewing patterns, so that you feel a bit more equipped to make an informed decision about what everything means and that you are going to choose the right size. If you prefer to see this type of information in written format with pictures, then you can check out the blog post that corresponds with this video. I'll put a link to it in the description. So the first step is that you have to take your body measurements. And there's going to be 4 key ones that I'm going to suggest that you start off with in the first instance. And it's important that you try to take these measurements in the underwear, or in minimal clothing, like in the underwear that you would wear when you intend to wear the finished garment. It might just be me, but I have found that since having and nursing 2 children, my bust can change quite significantly depending on what underwear I'm wearing. So I do usually always check what I'm going to be wearing with the finished garment, and I'll just check my measurements again. If you are still in the early stages of dressmaking and you're maybe just getting used to your own measurements, I would also suggest measuring yourself on different days at different times, because our bodies can change throughout the day, and it might be that you sort of get a bit of an average of what your measurements are. I know for me that my waist can change by at least an inch, if not 2 inches, depending on the time of the day, what I've eaten, time of the month, maybe even. So it's important that you just sort of get to know what your body is like in, different times as well. The other thing to sort of have awareness of at this stage is that every single body is totally different, and the proportions of bodies can be different as well. So for example, 2 people with exactly the same hip measurements, so that the circumference that they measure on the measuring tape might be the same, but it might be that one person has got quite narrow hips and a larger bottom, or it might be that somebody has got wider hips and a flatter bottom, but ultimately they've got the same circumference around the hips. Same with the bust. It might be that 2 people have the same full bust measurement, but somebody's got quite a narrow back with a fuller bust, or somebody's got a broader back with a flatter bust. So there is always going to be, interpretations that you need to make, and we'll get on to a little bit more of that later. But really, you just see these measurements as the starting point. You have to start somewhere, and this is the starting point for it. So when you get your measuring tape, I personally prefer to measure in inches. It might just be like a force of habit, or when you've just always done something, you get used to that. I also use quite a lot of patterns that are from North America as well, from the US and Canada, and they tend to primarily use inches, although they do have the metric conversion charts as well, but I don't know, I guess it just got used to inches, but you could choose whatever works for you. I would also suggest having a measuring tape that has inches and centimetres on the same side, just so that it's easy to like reference between the two. So that's my preference in a measuring tape. Also, it's likely that your measuring tape will start at 0, at 0 at one side, but then on the reverse, the 0 starts at the other side. So just make sure that you're measuring from 0 upwards when you take your measurements as well. Easy mistake to make when you're still navigating a measuring tape. So the measuring tape should be nice and flat and flush against your body. You don't want it tight, but you want it quite snug. Like, don't have it loose and that you're kind of pulling it out to sort of look at it and then adding on a few extra inches. And try to relax as much as you can. So it might be that you look in a mirror to do this and you just take a nice big deep breath in and then breathe out and just try to relax and just get your body in a nice sort of comfortable, relaxed position to take your measurements. So the 4 key ones that we're going to do is your high bust, your full bust, your waist and your hip. So to measure your high bust, you're taking the measuring tape around your body and then it's going to come like up into your armpits and right up over the top of your bust there. So that's your first measurement. Then you're going to take your full bust measurement. So again, round your body and then this time over the fullest part of your bust here. So you can look in the mirror when you do this, you can turn to the side, check that everything's sort of looking flat and level, the measuring tape not twisted or anything, for example. And then for the waist, it's going to be your natural waistline. So it's not necessarily where the waistband sits on your clothing. It's going to be a bit higher than that. Usually it's about sort of just like at the bottom of the rib cage really. So you're going to take your waist measurement there. And then your hip measurement is going to be at the fullest part of your hips. So you have to make sure that you catch your bottom within that when you do that as well. Again, it might help to look in a mirror when you're doing this so that you can see the level and positioning of the measuring tape. And do try to be as accurate as you can. Don't add some extra on because you might want your clothes a bit looser. We'll come to that later. At the moment, it's important to get what does your body actually measure, and that is the measurements that you want to note down. Once you have got those 4 key measurements, the next thing that you can do is work out what dressmaker's cup size you are. Now, this term of dressmaker's cup size has become more popular recently, especially now that more of the independent pattern companies are being more inclusive in their sizing and they're offering more cup sizes and they're offering a broader size range. And it's important to realise that the dressmaker's cup size bears no relation at all to what your bra cup size is. It's totally different. I know it is confusing because they still use letters to reference them, but you need to realise that it is different. So the way that you are going to calculate your dressmaker's cup size is that now you have got your high bust measurement and you've got your full bust measurement, you work out the difference between the two. So if the difference is 2 inches, or around 2 inches, it's typically going to be that you're a dressmaker's B cup. 3 inches, it's a C cup. 4 inches, it's a D cup. There are some pattern companies that have other cup sizes like an E or an F or a G. Cashmerette is an example of that. But typically what you're going to find is that quite often pattern companies will either offer a B cup or a D cup. Or it might be it's an A/B cup or a C/D cup. So it does vary, but that's like a sort of general guide for you. I do have a specific article, blog post and video that is just about dressmaker's cup size, and I'll link to that in the blog post and in the video here as well. So you can always check that out if you want just a little bit more of in-depth explanation of cup size. Not all pattern companies do offer different bust cups sizes, and if they don't really mention it, or it's just you can't really see it noted anywhere, it's probably quite likely that it's been drafted for a B cup, which is a difference of 2 inches between the high and full bust. Okay, so once you have got your measurements noted down, it is time to find your size on the body chart measurements that are in your pattern. So what I would suggest doing is circling them or plotting them on the measurement chart so that you can start to see what size you're falling in between. Now you will notice that different companies label their sizes differently, and I just cannot emphasize enough here how important it is to please ignore what the size is called. It is unlikely that it will bear any relation to what size you might typically buy in the shops. And there can be quite a few different reasons for that. So I mean, even when you go to high street shops and you buy clothing, it might be that you're a different size in one shop to the other. So there's that factor. Pattern companies are also the same. You can be a different size in different pattern companies. That certainly happens to me quite a lot. It can also be because of the country that the pattern originates from. So as I mentioned before, a lot of the independent pattern companies are American or Canadian, and they use American sizing, which is still like, it goes in twos, you know, 8, 10, 12, whatever, which is similar to what we use here in the UK, but they don't add up, they don't match up with each other. So that can be another reason why your size is different. Some pattern companies even label their sizes like A, B, C, D. It literally does not matter what it is called. The main bit of advice that I can give to you is please don't choose a size based on what size you think you are. You must go off your body measurements and the finished garment measurements, which I'll come to later. And don't feel sort of down or bad if what it's called is not what you expected. It's really normal that it's different, and it doesn't, you know, please don't feel bad about that or surprised about that either. It happens all the time and you are not alone. The other important thing that I want to point out here is that it's very, very likely that your body measurements will not fit neatly in one size. It's likely that your measurements are going to span 2, maybe even 3 sizes. I typically span about 3 sizes between my bust, waist and hip, and that is really normal as well. So it's just another thing to bear in mind. Don't be surprised about that. So once you know roughly where you are sitting on the size chart, the next thing that we're going to look at is the finished garment measurements. So some pattern companies will put this on the exterior part of their packaging, or it might be within the instruction booklet, or obviously if it's a PDF, it's probably going to be in the instruction booklet as well. But there should be somewhere, you know, all good pattern companies are going to list the finished garment measurements somewhere within their resources that come with the pattern. And this can be super, super useful in helping you choose a size, especially when you're spanning several sizes. So when when your body measurements aren't fitting neatly into one size. So this chart of the finished garment measurements are going to give you an indication of whether a pattern has positive or negative ease. So positive ease is when the garment is going to be bigger than your actual body when it's finished. So this is particularly true for woven fabrics. The garment has to be bigger than your actual body so you can get it on and off, and you can move in it, and you can breathe in it or sit down in it. So the garment does have to be a little bit bigger. If it's a fitted garment but it's made out of woven fabric, then it might have just a little bit of ease, like it might have maybe like 2 inches of ease, for example. Obviously can vary, that's just a bit of a guide. Whereas if it's got lots of positive ease, like if you think about those really popular buffet style dresses where the skirt's got lots of gathers in it, for example, then obviously in that situation, the hip measurement or the hip ease is going to be really positive, because all those gathers is going to give the hip finished measurement circumference much, much bigger than the body measurement. So that can be affected by the style of the garment as well. Negative ease is where the garment is smaller than your actual body. So this is typically true for garments that are fitted and made from stretchy fabric. So think leggings, fitted t-shirts, anything where the clothing is going to be really snug around your body, and that's where the fitting of the garment comes in. The fitting comes in from the fabric stretching around your body and having shape to it. Sometimes garments can have both positive and negative ease at different parts in the garment. So for example, the So Liberated Stasia dress is fitted at the bust, it is fitted at the waist, but then the hips, that sort of flared skirt or the fullness in the skirt has positive ease there, whereas it's got negative ease and it is much more fitted throughout the waist and the bust. So it can vary just depending on the fabric that is used to make the garment and also the style and design of it as well. So once you've got your actual body measurements plotted, you can then take account of the finished garment measurements, and it can help and inform you to make a decision when picking a size. So it can help you work out if the garment has got positive ease, is that enough to accommodate a different size at a different part of your body? So for example, you might be measuring one size at the bust, but you might measure a larger size at the waist. So you might be the next size up at the waist or the next size up again at the waist. But if you're making a garment that is quite loosely fitted over the waist anyway, and there is quite a lot of fullness there, then it might be that actually when you look at the finished garment measurements, you think, you know what, it's okay. I don't have to make any adaptations to the pattern there. I can just make the same size for the bust and the waist, and even though my body measurements for the waist are a bit bigger, there's still enough ease within the pattern that it's going to fit fine. It's not going to look too small over the waist area. It's not going to be too tight. Understanding the difference between positive and negative ease and how that relates to the sizing can also help you to customize and adapt the overall fit of the garment as well, especially when a garment is designed to be oversized. So the True Bias Marlowe cardigan is a really good example of that. It is a very slouchy, loose fitting cardigan, and it is supposed to be big and oversized, but some people don't like it being so oversized, so they size down and they might make one or even two sizes smaller so that they get a bit more of a snug look. So when you're picking a size, if you generally don't like clothes to be too full and voluminous, then knowing what size you're picking and how much ease is in that size can help you to judge what size you should really be choosing. If you want a more fitted look, you're going to have to size down a little bit. The other thing that you can check on the finished garment measurements is the length as well. So typically garments will say from the nape of the neck to the bottom hemline, how long is it? And usually when I'm working this out, if I don't have somebody to help me sort of put the measuring tape on my body, is I'll get the measuring tape and say like the finished length was, you know, it was going to be for a top or something, it was going to be, I don't know, like 25 inches for example. Then I would just hold my measuring tape at 25 inches and then I would just try and straighten my measuring tape out as much as I could, and then I'd hold that at the back of my neck and look in the mirror, and then I would see where the bottom of my measuring tape was coming to give me an idea of where it was going to land. So that can also help you if you feel like you might have, some people have a short or a long torso, so it might be that the waistline seam, you might have noticed that perhaps on ready to wear clothes that the waistline seam doesn't seem to sit quite in the right position sometimes, so it might be that you can customize that. You can customize the length of trousers or skirts by checking out the finished length as well, the inside leg seam. So it's another good one to check when you're looking at the finished garment measurements. So the next thing to do is, if you've looked at your body measurements chart, you've looked at the finished garment measurements chart, and you still feel like there might be adaptations you have to make to the pattern, there are a few easy things that you can try in the first instance to get there. But just bear in mind that everybody's journey will be really different. And as I said in the beginning, this is the sort of first steps in trying to increase your awareness of choosing a size and things that you can do to get sewing patterns to fit you better. So it might be that you want to blend between the sizes between your bust and waist, or your waist and hip, or all three if you're making a dress. And what that means simply is that if you're measuring one size at the bust but a different size at the waist, is that over the bust area and the shoulders and the neckline, you cut out one size, whatever size you're measuring at, but then as you get to the waist, you're just going to merge from that size line out or in to a different size line. So what you have to do is basically connect the lines yourself. You're going to draw in a line that connects those two size lines together. So you could either do that freehand, so you could literally just think, okay, you know, I'm this size at the bust, and then I'm just going to draw in a line, and by the time I get to the sort of waist level, I'm going to be merging in or out to the different size. Or it might be that you don't feel confident to freehand it. You could use a ruler or a curved ruler. You can get Dressmaker's curved rulers as well. So you could do that to help you join it up together. And then the same for the waist to the hip as well. So in a pair of trousers, for example, you could move from one size at the waist to a different size at the hip by, again, just knowing what size line you're aiming for and freehanding it and just drawing a gradual line that merges from one size to the other. And you want to aim to try and make that as smooth as you can, because you still want your seams to be nice and smooth. You don't want them to be like a sort of jagged line, like out to one size and then back into another or anything. You need to sort of graduate it and try to blend it in a little bit, and know that you can still change that later. Once you've actually constructed the garment, you can still alter the side seams a little bit to accommodate a difference in size. So it might be that level of adaptation is enough for you, and all you need to do is blend between the sizes to get something that's going to work. It doesn't happen all the time, and sometimes there might be further adjustments that you need to make, like a shoulder adjustment or a sway back adjustment or a full or flat seat adjustment if you're making trousers or jeans. So they're all much more in-depth things, and try not to get too sort of bogged down with them right now. They're out with the scope of this first introductory video, but I do plan to make further resources on those types of things later. But it's a good starting point to just know about all of these sort of easier things that you can try in the first instance. The other thing that you might want to do is shorten and lengthen the pattern as well. So if you've checked the finished garment length or the inside leg seam and you feel like you want to make it longer or shorter, then you can use shorten and lengthen lines that are on the pattern. So they're quite often indicated with either a line, or there might be two sort of thin lines together, and it'll say shorten/lengthen. And in that instance, if you're lengthening it, you're just going to cut the pattern in two and open it out, and then you need to stick a bit of paper in between to just make it a bit longer. Or if you're making it shorter, you're going to overlap them. It might be that you have to do what's called truing up the seam in that instance. So say you overlapped something to make it shorter, and then the sort of line of the side of the pattern then just doesn't look nice and smooth again, so you might have to just sort of curve that out and just kind of smooth it to make it a nice continuous line there. But that will really depend on the type of garment that you're making and how much you're shortening it by as well. For some trousers, for example, I know that they're probably going to come up too long, but what I tend to do is just once I've made the trousers and then I come to hem them, it might be that I'm just trimming a little bit off the bottom. But that will, again, that's going to depend on the style that you're making and what the hem is like, and whether it's easy to shorten it there. Or if you're shortening it by a lot, then it might be better that you just shorten it within the middle of the pattern piece. If your pattern doesn't have shorten, lengthen lines and you feel like you want to do that, you can draw in your own line to shorten and lengthen it. It just has to be at 90 degrees to either a fold line, if your pattern piece has got a fold line, or the grain line that is on the pattern. If you get either like a piece of paper or a gridded ruler, then you can draw in a line that is 90 degrees to that grain line or that fold line, and just then use that as your shorten, lengthen line. And that can also allow you to shorten and lengthen at different parts of the garment as well. Typically they're going to be within the crotch or at the waist, or it might be in the length of the garment as well. But if you wanted to shorten the distance from here to here, for example, then you could just draw a line in there and shorten that little section yourself by drawing in your own shorten, lengthen line. So once you have settled on your size, then it's time to cut out and make your garment. But bear in mind that it's unlikely that the fitting process will end here. I would still recommend really trying on your garments as you're making them and tweaking the fit along as you go. It might be altering the seam allowance a little bit, or again, as I mentioned before, altering the hem. There's various things that you can do once you start constructing your garment as well to make it fit, and I will be touching on them throughout what is going to be a bit of a series on just helping you to get a better fit in your garment. The next post that I plan to do is on making a toile or a muslin, and we get a lot of questions around making a toile, like should you even do one in the first place, what kind of fabric should you use, and how to actually transfer changes or adaptations that you've identified on the toile to the paper pattern, or to them translating that into making your actual garment. So thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, then just remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss my next video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!